At my granddaughter's wedding, she said, "Don't sit in the front. You don't look presentable." I smiled and said, "Perfect timing, but you're leaving first." I arrived at my granddaughter's wedding with my hands clasped tightly around my old purse, the same one I used to carry to every school event she ever had. The country club shimmered with champagne-colored decorations, and the guests walked as if they all knew the weight of their own wealth. I had worn the dress I saved for her college graduation, pressed the night before with careful hands. It was the nicest thing I owned, though I suppose in that room it looked like a relic from a thrift bin. Still, I walked toward the front row because, after raising Emily for most of her life, I believed I had earned the right to see her clearly on her big day. I barely made it 3 steps before she appeared in front of me in her white gown, glowing under the chandeliers, flanked by bridesmaids and her mother. Her smile disappeared the moment her eyes hit my dress. She stopped so abruptly that the fabric of her gown snapped in the air. "Do not sit in the front," she said loudly, making sure the nearby guests heard her. "You do not look presentable." There was a small gasp from someone behind her. Emily went on before I could open my mouth. "I do not want people thinking our family cannot afford better. And honestly, the smell of disinfectant and hospital sweat mixed into the photos would be awful. You understand that, right?" Her mother, my daughter-in-law, chimed in, shaking her head. "Mom, please, sit in the back. That dress looks like something someone donated to Salvation Army, and even they nearly rejected it." "One," bridesmaid whispered. "She looks like a homeless lady who wandered in." My chest tightened, but I steadied my breath. I told myself to stay calm. I told myself that I had survived worse humiliations in life, and I could survive this one quietly. "I only want to see you clearly," I said. "I will sit still. I will not disturb anyone." Emily scoffed. "You have been seeing me clearly my whole life. Today is about me, not you. Around this time, if you feel stories about justice and dignity deserve to be heard, darling, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far away into places where people need courage. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Now, keep listening." Mark walked over then, all broad shoulders and polished charm, sliding an arm around Emily's waist as if he were rescuing her from something unsightly. "Honey, calm down," he murmured, kissing her cheek. "She is just nervous. Old people do not understand these things." He turned to me with a smile so polite it felt predatory. "We just want you comfortable, Nancy. Maybe the 2nd or 3rd row is better." He sounded gentle enough that several guests nodded approvingly, as if he had just mediated world peace. Emily turned to adjust her veil, and in that brief moment Mark leaned closer to me. His breath brushed my cheek. "Brides are crazy, right?" he whispered. "Older women like you know that better than anyone." I felt my stomach twist, but before I could step back he went on. "Up close. You look better than she gives you credit for," he said softly. "Must have been something when you were young." Then he winked. A slow, smug, disgusting wink that sliced straight through the thin layer of dignity I had left in that moment. Inside my ribs something cold tightened, something older than humiliation instinct, the same instinct that had whispered to me the very first time he visited Emily at my house, the same instinct that told me his interest in her had nothing to do with love, and that the way he looked at me was not admiration but calculation. He turned back to Emily, draping his arm around her as she laughed with her friends, her earlier cruelty already forgotten. I looked at both of them, my granddaughter in her perfect white gown, and the man she was about to marry with his polished shoes and rotten eyes. And something in me, something that had been stepped on too many times, finally rose to the surface. "You do not want me in the front row?" I said quietly. "All right, perfect timing." Emily paused, turning slightly, annoyed that I was speaking again. Her veil fluttered. "But you are the one leaving first today," I added. She snorted. "You're not doing anything except shaking where you stand." I shook my head slowly. "No, Emily, I am not threatening you. I am telling the truth. Her mother rolled her eyes. "Mom, please stop embarrassing us." The bridesmaids giggled again. Someone pulled out a phone to record. My cheeks burned, but my spine straightened on its own. I walked to the very last row, feeling every stare on the back of my neck. I sat where they wanted me, with my purse in my lap and my heart pounding like a fist in my chest. But I did not look down. My eyes stayed fixed on the aisle, and for the first time in a long time, I was not the fragile old woman they thought I was. I was something else entirely. The truth was coming, and I would not hide from it anymore. I used to think that raising a child out of love would guarantee some piece of that love finding its way back to you. Life corrected me. Life corrected me hard. Emily was 4 when my son's wife packed a single suitcase, climbed into a stranger's truck, and never looked back. My son lost, angry, drowning, handed Emily to me on a cold Tuesday morning and said, "Mom, I cannot do this. Not now." He left the next month for an oil field job in Texas. I did not see him again for nearly 2 years. By then, Emily was calling me Grandma, the way little kids say home. I was an ER nurse then, sometimes a forensic nurse when the hospital needed one. My shifts switched so often that my body forgot what daytime was. I would come home at 5 a.m., make Emily breakfast with shaking hands, nap 2 hours, then walk her to school. I packed lunches, washed uniforms, read bedtime stories half asleep, and learned to stretch $1 so tightly it nearly tore. I skipped dinners some nights just so she could have second helpings. I treated myself only to coffee that went cold before I finished it. There was a man once, good, gentle, a widower, who asked me to marry him. I said no. I was afraid Emily would feel replaced, unwanted, abandoned all over again. My heart wanted companionship. Hers needed security. I chose hers. But children do not always see sacrifice. They see absence. The night of her first ballet recital, I was in trauma room 3, trying to keep a man's chest from collapsing. By the time I arrived at the school, the parking lot was empty, and the janitor was locking the doors. Emily later told me her friends had joked, "Your grandma didn't come because she doesn't care." She did not tell me that until years later, after the joke had already calcified into truth inside her. There were so many small things she carried like stones in her pockets. When she was 14, I locked the door after she tried sneaking out at midnight. A man had attacked 2 girls in our neighborhood. I was terrified. She told her friends I held her prisoner like a jail ward. When she was 16, I bought her a used car, safe, sturdy, but 10 years old. She told people I bought it because I was too lazy to work harder for a nicer one. And then there were the wounds that life inflicted on her outside our home. The kids at school whispered, "Her mom ditched her." Some said, "She lives with that hospital lady who always smells like disinfectant." I became the embodiment of every shame that clung to her. Once, when she was 13, exhausted after a double shift, I muttered, "You're acting just like your mother." I meant impulsive, reckless, stubborn. She heard abandonment. That sentence carved a canyon between us I never fully bridged. When she turned 19, the crack finally split wide open. She came home announcing she was dropping out of college to follow a boy in a band. They were going to travel, live out of a van, find themselves. I told her absolutely not. I told her I had worked too hard, saved too much, sacrificed too deeply for her to throw away her future on someone who could barely keep a guitar tuned. She exploded. "You don't want me to leave because you're afraid of being alone. Everything you've done for me was just so you could keep me trapped with you. You're nothing, Grandma. A nurse who stinks of medicine, with a tiny house and no life." I remember the way her face twisted like she was spitting poison she'd kept for years. "If you hadn't taken me in, maybe I would have ended up with a real family. One that wasn't poor. One that didn't embarrass me." The words hit me so hard that for a moment my vision blurred. I opened my mouth, but nothing came. My throat locked itself to keep the pain from spilling out. She grabbed her backpack, slammed the door, and stayed away for 3 days. When she returned, she acted like nothing had happened, but something had, something permanent. From then on, she rewrote every sacrifice into a flaw, every protection into control, every gesture of love into a burden. And in the stories she told people, in the stories she told herself, I was always cast as the villain, the obstacle, the curse she had survived. That was when I understood. You cannot reason with someone who needs you to be the enemy. You cannot heal a wound someone refuses to stop reopening. And standing in the back row of her wedding that day, watching her laugh with the very man who had just winked at me like I was something he could sample, I finally felt it, not surprise, not heartbreak, but recognition. Emily had not become cruel overnight. She had been building the case against me for years, and I had been too busy loving her to notice. I still remember the day Emily brought Mark to my door, her face glowing with the kind of hope only the young and naive can hold without it burning them. "Grandma, you're going to love him," she said breathlessly. "He's different, successful, respectful. He knows real class." The words real class lingered in her voice like she was trying to convince me she finally belonged to a world that had always felt slightly out of her reach. Mark stood on my porch with a bottle of wine in one hand and a bouquet of lilies in the other. He smiled wide, too wide, the kind of smile that tries too hard to fit whatever shape you want it to. "Mrs. Reed," he said, stepping inside like he had known the place long before. "This home is classic, warm, it has character." I watched his eyes. They didn't linger on Emily, they darted around my living room, scanning. The framed picture of Robert in his Navy uniform, the antique bookshelf Robert had built, the old steel lockbox tucked halfway under a side table, the jewelry box on the dresser in the hallway, barely cracked open, not admiration, inventory. Emily didn't see it. Love blinded her quickly, the same way need blinds the hungry. She was in the kitchen grabbing glasses when Mark lowered his voice and turned toward me. "So, Nancy, you live here alone?" His tone was casual, but his eyes stayed sharp. "For quite some time," I replied, letting the distance settle between my words. "Must have been tough after your husband passed," he said. "Did he leave you a good insurance policy? Retirement? This house, it's under your name, right?" The questions slid in like knives hidden inside compliments. I kept my posture still. "We have enough," I said simply. Mark chuckled, leaning just a little closer. "Older women like you, you're usually smart with money. Older, but not stupid." He tapped the arm of my chair lightly, and the touch was so unnecessary my skin crawled. His eyes drifted to Robert's photograph. "Handsome man," he said. "I can see why he married you." His smile twisted slightly, half flirtation, half evaluation. "I bet you were something when you were young." A strange heat crawled over my shoulders, not from flattery but from disgust. The way he said it, like I was a memory he wanted to peel open and examine, that was when my training kicked in. Years in the ER, years in forensic nursing, taught me to see what others miss. His complexion wasn't flushed from wine, it had a gray-blue undertone, the kind that clings to people who use certain substances long enough for their veins to protest. There was a small puncture mark behind his left ear, barely healed, a place no doctor would choose for a routine injection. His hands trembled slightly when he set the wine bottle down, not enough for Emily to notice, but enough for me. I asked softly, "You take medication regularly, Mark? Something that requires injections?" If he were honest, his answer would have been short. Instead, he swallowed, lips twitching. "Just, some stress treatments. Everyone has something." "No, not stress. Abuse, chemical or pharmaceutical, I didn't know yet, but I knew he wasn't clean." Emily re-entered the room then, holding glasses and laughing at something on her phone. Mark's smile snapped back into place. He moved to stand behind my chair, resting his hand on the top of it, a gesture too intimate, too deliberate, testing me. Testing Emily's reaction, seeing how close he could get before someone objected. Emily, oblivious, beamed. "See? He's good with you. I told you he respects my family." Respect. If only she could feel the sweat cooling on the back of my neck. Mark squeezed the chair lightly, still smiling. "I like knowing the people who matter to my bride-to-be. You've taken care of her all her life. That's admirable." But his eyes said something else entirely. "How much are you worth? How much can I take? How much can you give before you break?" The longer he lingered behind me, the heavier the air felt. He wasn't just evaluating Emily, he was evaluating me, the widow with a house nearly paid off, a modest pension, and no one to protect her except the very girl desperate to escape her shadow. When he finally stepped away, I breathed out so quietly even I barely heard it. Emily looped her arm around his. "He's the best thing that ever happened to me," she said proudly. I smiled at her. A soft one, because love makes fools of us all. But inside, a quiet truth settled like a stone in my stomach. Mark wasn't looking at Emily like a partner. He wasn't looking at me like family. He was looking at both of us like opportunity. And for the first time, I saw my place in his plan, not the mother of the bride, not even the obstacle. Just another potential prize, another door he might try opening, another woman he thought was too old to see him coming. I stayed at Emily's house the night before the wedding, partly because she insisted, mostly because I wanted to keep an eye on Mark. Something about the way he hovered at the edges of every room put a weight on my chest that wouldn't ease. Around midnight, unable to sleep, I went downstairs for a glass of water. The house was quiet except for a faint murmur, a voice coming from Mark's office, the door pulled almost closed. I was about to walk past when his tone sharpened, low but agitated. "No. Listen." He hissed into the phone. "She's loaded. Her parents built an entire business empire. Once the wedding is done, I'll have access." My hand froze on the banister. He chuckled then, a sound so slick it made my skin prickle. "And the grandma? She looks like she's got money stashed too. You should see that old lockbox." My breath caught. I stood completely still. Then he said it, the line that turned my blood to ice. "I'm not in this for love. I'm in this to clean up the mess in New Mexico, and the pill situation. This happened a month before the wedding. Pill situation." His voice dropped even lower. "Once the money flows, I can pay off what I owe and move past this. Just need to get through the wedding." That was the moment I knew the problem wasn't new. It was ongoing, dangerous, and heading straight for Emily. Every instinct I had ever trusted in my work returned, sharp and cold. Before I could think, my fingers slid instinctively to the recording function on my phone. Old habits from forensic nursing never die. Sometimes they simply wait. I pressed record, held my breath, and captured every word until the call ended with Mark muttering, "She'll never know." Emily is so easy to manage. The last sentence hit harder than the rest. Easy to manage. Like she was a receipt he could crumple and throw away. When the call ended, I crept back to the guest room, hands shaking. I barely slept a wink. For the first time that night, I did not feel small. I felt responsible. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I drove home early, told Emily I needed to pick up my shoes. In truth, I needed privacy. I sat at my kitchen table with the recording playing softly and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Helena, an old colleague from my forensic nursing days, now working part-time with a police liaison team. "Helena, sweetheart," I whispered. "I need your help." Quietly. She listened patiently to everything, the recording, my suspicions, the strange puncture marks I'd seen on Mark's skin, the behavioral signs. Then her voice tightened. "Nancy, this isn't small." Within an hour, she had run what she could through public databases, then called in a favor from a contact in New Mexico. The silence on the line stretched long enough to knot my stomach before she finally said, "I found something, and you're not going to like it. Mark was married. Not formerly married, currently married. A legal certificate in New Mexico confirmed his union with a woman named Lila Ramos. No divorce, no separation, still active. And there's more, Helena added softly. Lila had filed a restraining order against him 2 years earlier, domestic violence, coercion, and suspected opioid abuse. Mark had been investigated for misusing prescription pain medication, and although the case never resulted in formal charges, his name appeared in multiple flagged reports, emergency room visits, pharmacy alerts, all signs of someone skating on the thin, cracking ice of addiction. Helena exhaled heavily. Nancy, this man is dangerous. Financially, emotionally, physically. And if he's planning to pay off something in New Mexico, it might mean debt, dealers, or worse. I closed my eyes, pressing my hand to my forehead. A wave of sorrow hit me, first sorrow for Emily. For the cruelty she'd shown me, yes, but also for how desperately she wanted to be wanted. Then anger followed, hot, sharp, clarifying. Helena, I whispered, I need copies, documents, everything. She didn't hesitate. Within an hour she emailed me the marriage certificate, the restraining order, and the publicly accessible notes from the investigations. I printed them at my kitchen counter, each page sliding out of the printer like a small, undeniable truth. Then I downloaded the call recording onto a USB drive and onto my phone. No loopholes. No way anyone could accuse me of fabrication. I wasn't finished. I called another old friend. This one, a retired attorney who had guided survivors through courtrooms for decades. When I explained what I had, he was silent for a long moment before saying, Nancy, with this evidence, you have the legal right to interrupt the ceremony if the officiant asks whether anyone objects. And if you speak, they have to pause the wedding. I don't want to embarrass her, I murmured. But you do want to save her, he replied. I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. Emily had humiliated me, dismissed me, treated me like a stain on her life, but she was still the girl I'd raised, the one who clung to my leg at age 4 when her father walked out, the one who cried into my shoulder when her mother never came back. By noon, I had placed every document into a large manila envelope. My hands trembled as I sealed it, but for the first time in years, my fear wasn't of them hurting me. It was of me being too late to stop what was coming. I held the envelope against my chest, closed my eyes, and breathed deeply. All my life, I had stood in the background cleaning messes, swallowing hurt, stitching wounds I didn't cause. Not this time. This time, I would step forward. Not for respect, not for revenge, but so the truth couldn't be ignored. And so my granddaughter wouldn't walk straight into a life that would break her completely. The wedding began with the kind of polished elegance Emily had always chased. Crystal vases glimmered, string music floated through the room, and the guests, all dressed in shades of money, shifted proudly in their seats. Emily looked radiant, glowing with the certainty that her future was secured now that she had chosen a man she believed outshone the grandmother who raised her. I sat in the very back, exactly where she wanted me, my hands clenched around my purse, the same purse holding the envelope that could crack this room in half. My heart thudded in my chest, not from fear, but from the weight of what I knew was coming. The officiant lifted his book and began the ceremony. Emily beamed. Mark adjusted his cufflinks with a smug little half-smile. Every so often his eyes flicked subtly toward me as if making sure the old lady stayed in her place. When the vows were done, and the room settled into that anticipatory hush, the officiant spoke the line I had been waiting for. If anyone here has a reason why these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace. Silence. A thick, expectant silence. I rose. A few guests gasped softly at the scrape of my chair. My cane tapped once on the polished floor as I stepped into the aisle. Heads turned, whispers fluttered, and Emily's perfect smile snapped in half. Badanglam jivoy, she hissed, voice cracking. Sit down, Are you trying to ruin my life? One bridesmaid muttered behind her hand. I told Emily she should have kept her out of sight. I didn't look at them. I kept walking until I reached the first row, then turned to face the officiant and both families. I'm not here to ruin anything, I said calmly. I'm here to protect a girl I raised from the moment her parents left her behind. To protect her from a man who does not intend to stay. Mark stiffened. Emily's jaw trembled. I reached into my purse. When I took out my phone, Emily laughed too loudly, too sharply. What? You want to show everyone your Facebook? Sit down. But I pressed the playback button. Mark's voice filled the hall, echoing through the speakers as clearly as if he were confessing into a microphone. She's loaded. I'm not in this for love. I'm in this to clean up the mess in New Mexico and the pills situation. Guests stiffened, murmurs rising like a storm. And the grandma? The recording continued. She looks like she's got money stashed away too. A ripple of disgust moved across the audience. Emily's face drained of color. This is fake, a deep fake or something. She can't even use a smartphone. I lifted a thick envelope and handed it to the officiant and to an attorney from Mark's family who stood abruptly, curiosity turning to dread. Then these must also be fake, I said. The attorney unfolded the documents, lips tightening line by line. He showed the officiant. Emily watched their faces fall with growing panic. He read aloud, voice sharp. Certificate of marriage, New Mexico. The groom is already legally married. Gasps erupted. And a restraining order for domestic violence. The gasps grew louder. And documentation involving opioid misuse and police inquiries. Mark lunged forward suddenly, snatching for the papers. This is old. It means nothing. She's just a bitter old hag who can't mind her. Emily reached for him, and Mark shoved her reflexively, hard enough to make her stumble. The audience saw it. Everyone saw it. A cold hush blanketed the room. I stepped closer, my voice steady. I worked decades in forensic nursing, in morgues, in trauma units. I've seen the kind of men who smile at you while plotting your ruin. I smelled the medication on your skin the first time I met you. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Emily fell to her knees, her bouquet slipping from her hands, petals scattering like broken promises. Her eyes lifted to mine, wide with shock, betrayal, desperation. Did anyone know? She whispered. Did anyone know besides you and not tell me? I looked at her not with anger, but with a sorrow sharp enough to cut. I told you, Emily. I warned you with everything I had, but you only listen to people who flatter you, and anyone who tells you the truth becomes your enemy. She bowed her head, trembling. Across the aisle, Mark's father stood abruptly. This ceremony cannot continue, he said. His tone left no room for argument. The officiant closed his book. Guests began to rise, uneasy and murmuring. Mark backed away toward the exit. But as he reached the doors, two officers stepped forward. Officers Helena had contacted after advising them of a possible bigamy case requiring verification. Mark froze. The officers signaled him aside. I didn't move. I simply stepped back, letting the world rearrange itself around the truth. For the first time in years, I was not the woman being shoved to the edges. I was the one who pulled back the curtain, and the whole room finally saw what had been hiding behind it. Outside the shattered wedding hall, guests drifted in confused clusters, whispering like wind through broken glass. Some stared at Mark as the officers questioned him near the entrance, their uniforms reflecting in the polished doors. They did not cuff him, not yet, but their firm posture told the truth. He was not walking away from this cleanly. One officer folded his arms and asked about the New Mexico marriage. Another held out a file with the restraining order. Mark's voice rose in cracked denial, shifting from charm to fury in seconds. I had seen that shift in victims' reports too many times to doubt its meaning. People kept glancing at me, some with gratitude, others with that old, tired judgment. Emily's mother stormed toward me first, her face blotched with embarrassment. You could not have waited until after the ceremony, she hissed. Just once, Mother, you could have stayed quiet. I met her eyes without flinching. We have spent a lifetime waiting until after the damage, after the bruises, after the truth is too late. Women die in the space between wait and after. I will not add Emily to that list. She shook her head and walked away, humiliated and unable to admit that she, too, had been willing to sacrifice Emily's safety for the sake of appearances. Inside, the wedding staff dimmed the lights and began clearing the empty chairs. The air smelled of wilted flowers and disappointment. Then a bridesmaid approached me nervously. "Nancy, Emily wants to see you. She's in the dressing room." I inhaled once, deeply. I knew this moment had to come. The bridesmaid's room was quiet except for Emily's muffled sobs. Her once perfect makeup smeared down her cheeks, her veil discarded on the floor like a failed promise. She swung toward me sharply, eyes blazing through tears. "You ruined it," she choked out. "You ruined the only day I had to feel happy." I closed the door behind me. "If this was happiness," I said softly, "then yes, I ruined it. I ruined the illusion that would have cost you your safety, your money, and your future." Emily's fists clenched at her sides. "You did it because you cannot stand the idea that I might have a better life than you." The lie cut deep, not because it was cruel, but because she truly believed it. "Emily," I said, my voice steady, "you have told yourself that story for so long that it feels true, but the truth is simpler than that. I am the only person in your life willing to risk losing you, to keep you alive." Her breath hitched. I watched anger collapse into hurt. "You think I did not know?" she whispered. "Every time the kids at school said I was abandoned, they asked why I lived with a grandmother instead of parents. I hated that look in their eyes. I hated feeling like charity. And you, your uniform, your cheap car, your tiny house, every reminder of you reminded me of what I did not have." I felt that confession land in my chest like a weight. I stepped closer but kept my hands to myself. "So you hated the one person who stayed," I said quietly, "because it was safer than hating the people who left." She sank onto the sofa, trembling. "I thought Mark would make everything different," she said. "He told me I deserved luxury, respect, a life that didn't smell like antiseptic or hospital food." Her voice cracked. "I wanted to believe him more than I ever believed you." I knelt slowly so we were eye level. "People like Mark choose girls who want to be chosen. They look for the hole in a person's heart, Emily, and then they pour lies into it. That is not love. It is a transaction." Tears spilled down her face. "Bah, I was so awful to you." I felt my own eyes sting, but I kept them clear. "You were hurting," I said, "but hurting me will not undo what your mother did. It will not undo what Mark did. It will not undo the shame you carried alone." I reached out and placed one hand gently on her shoulder. "But listen carefully. I will not sit in the back anymore, letting you stab me with every wound you refuse to heal." Emily lowered her head slowly into her hands, shaking. "What am I supposed to do now?" she whispered. I stood. "You will stand up. You will breathe. And you will build a life that does not depend on a man who lies or a grandmother you resent." She looked up, eyes raw. "Will you help me?" My throat tightened. "I will love you," I said, "but I will not fix everything for you anymore." That is the boundary. For a moment, we were silent together, two women divided by years of misunderstanding, bound by blood, bruised by choices. Then I stepped back. When I walked out of the venue, nobody noticed. No one stopped me. No one thanked me. But for the first time in many years, I did not feel pushed aside. I felt steady. I felt right. That day, I was not allowed to sit in the front row, but I stood in the front line between my granddaughter and the cliff she never saw coming. Months passed after the wedding that never became a marriage. News about Mark traveled in fragments, an indictment here, an ongoing investigation there, but I did not follow every detail. Men like him always find their way into deeper trouble without my help. What I did hear was enough. He was facing charges in 2 states, including the mess in New Mexico he had bragged about cleaning up. One officer told me he would not be charming his way past consequences this time. I did not celebrate, but I slept easier. Emily's world collapsed quietly, the way a flower bends until the stem finally snaps. She lost her job within weeks. The company wanted distance from the scandal. The venue kept the deposit. Vendors demanded payment. Guests who once envied her now whispered that she had been desperate enough to marry a man with 2 wives. Her friends, the ones who cheered her cruelty toward me, drifted away. Nobody wants to stand too close when the illusion of perfection shatters. As for me, I returned to my small routines. I tended my garden, even though my hands trembled more these days. I went to church, where a few women squeezed my hand and said, "You did the brave thing most of us never manage." I joined a support circle for older women, widows, grandmothers, caregivers who had survived being dismissed, ignored, or used. Listening to their stories, I realized mine was not unusual. Cruelty toward the elderly is common, just carefully hidden behind polite words and family photos. For the first time in decades, my life felt quiet in a way that did not ache. I missed Emily, not the sharp-tongued woman she had become, but the child who used to fall asleep on my lap after nightmares. But I did not chase her. Some distances must exist for healing to begin. Nearly 3 months after the wedding, I heard a soft knock at my door. I opened it to find Emily standing on the porch. She looked smaller than I remembered, as if her pride had melted off her like snow. She wore simple jeans and a sweater, not the expensive things she used to flaunt. In her hands was a cheap bakery box with a crooked ribbon. She whispered, "Hi, Grandma." I stepped aside but did not smile the way I once would have. She walked in carefully, like someone entering a sacred place. She set the box on the table and took a slow breath. "I brought you cinnamon rolls. The cheap kind. I do not have much right now." I nodded. "Thank you." She sat, twisting her fingers together. Then she said words I never expected to hear without blame attached. "I am not here to accuse you, or to ask why. I just want to talk." Silence settled between us before she continued. "Grandma, I am sorry. I am sorry for everything I said to you. I am sorry for how I treated you. I am sorry for making you the villain in every story I told." Her voice cracked and she looked down at her hands. "I hated the smell of antiseptic on you. It reminded me of the night Mom left me at the hospital and never came back. All these years, I blamed the smell. Then I blamed you, because it was easier than blaming the people who abandoned me." Her confession was raw and shaking. "And when people made fun of me for living with you, I convinced myself that you were the problem, not them. I wanted so badly to be someone else, someone with a glamorous life, that I turned you into everything I wanted to outrun." I felt something tighten, not in anger, but in grief for the child she had been. Still, I did not reach across the table. I did not rescue her from her own pain. I had learned that lesson. I said, "I forgive you because I do not want to spend the rest of my life carrying bitterness. But forgiveness does not mean pretending none of it happened, and it does not mean you get to speak to me the way you used to ever again." She looked up, tears slipping silently. I know that. I do not expect you to forget." I held her gaze. "If you want me in your life, Emily, you will have to learn how to tell your story truthfully. Not the version where you make me the reason your life hurt. The real version, the one where I stayed." Her chin trembled. "I will try," she whispered. When she stood to leave, her eyes were wet but lighter than before, as if she had set down a weight she had carried for half her lifetime. She walked toward her car, shoulders shaking, but no longer running. I watched her go. I knew I did not have many years left, but at least now I no longer lived inside the twisted story she once used to punish me. At least now she had taken the first step toward seeing me clearly, and maybe, for the remainder of my days, that would be enough. My kitchen has always been small, but now it feels just right. The kettle hums softly, and the warm yellow light glows against the old wooden cabinets. I sit in the same chair I have kept for nearly 20 years, its legs a little wobbly but still steady, steadier than most people I have known. For the first time in a long while, I feel steady too. On the table beside me sits a framed photograph of my late husband, Robert. He is laughing in the picture, head tilted slightly back, the way he always did when I tried to tell a joke but messed up the punchline. Next to the frame rests my wedding ring, and the simple gold band he wore until the day he left this world. The rings are not valuable to anyone but me. That is enough. I look at the photo and say softly, "They said I wasn't fit to sit in the front row at our granddaughter's wedding. Told me I wasn't presentable. But the truth is, I sat exactly where I needed to, as close as possible to the truth, and far enough from the lie she was about to marry." The steam from my tea curls upward. I wrap both hands around the cup, feeling its warmth seep into my palms, into old bones that have carried more weight than anyone realizes. People think growing old makes you fragile. It doesn't. It just makes your courage quieter. I think about the front row seat Emily said I didn't deserve, the way she looked at me, the way her voice sharpened on the word presentable, as if my entire existence embarrassed her. For years, I believed her shame was my fault. For years, I tried to shrink myself so she could feel bigger. But sitting here now, I understand something clearly. A front row seat is not a physical chair. It is a place in someone's story. Emily pushed me away from hers. She had every right to do so. But she forgot something important. I still had my own story. And in my story, I had never truly left the front row at all. I take a slow sip of tea and let my mind wander through the pieces of my life, raising Emily through tantrums and illness, working night shifts, missing celebrations I desperately wanted to attend, keeping a roof over our heads with hands that never stopped shaking from exhaustion, being mocked for smelling like disinfectant, being told I was nothing. There were years when I believed all of that meant I belonged in the back row of every room. But the day of the wedding taught me something else. A woman who carries the truth does not sit at the back of anything. I glance again at Robert's picture. "You would have laughed," I whisper. "You always said I was too soft-hearted." But I wasn't soft that day. Maybe for the first time in my life, I wasn't soft at all. I remember Emily's face when Mark's lies collapsed. The shock, the betrayal, the way her knees buckled. It hurt to watch. It also felt like justice, a justice I never wished on her, but one she walked straight into with pride blinding her steps. And yet, even in that moment, even after years of being her punching bag, I did not hate her. I suppose that is what it means to love someone you raised. You can stop letting them hurt you, but you cannot stop caring that they are hurting. Still, caring does not mean returning to the old dynamic. It does not mean giving her power she no longer knows how to hold gently. I turn my focus to the chair under me. The old wood creaks as I shift my weight, and I smile. This seat, this humble, worn seat, is my front row, not to a wedding, but to my own life. For decades, I stood behind others, cleaning their messes, soothing their tempers, catching their falling pieces. I was background, support, the afterthought. But now, after everything, I finally pulled my chair to the front of the stage that belongs to me. Robert's photo reflects a shimmer of light. His eyes seem to meet mine, filled with the quiet pride he used to carry when he thought I wasn't looking. I rest my hand beside the frame. "I made mistakes," I tell him. "I spent too long believing I had to earn a place at my own table, but I'm here now. I'm finally here." Outside, a soft wind brushes the windowsill. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. Life goes on, ordinary and unbothered by human heartbreak. That is the comfort of solitude. You learn the world does not fall apart when yours does. I take another sip of tea and say the words that have lived in my chest since the wedding day. Emily tried to push me out of the front row of her life. She thought it would make her look more important. But she never understood the only person who truly lost face that day was the bride who chose the wrong man to stand beside her. The truth sits with me like an old companion. She pushed me out of the picture she wanted the world to see, I murmur. But in the story of my own life, I have always sat in the front row. And tonight, in this small kitchen, with the warm light glowing and Robert's picture looking back at me, I finally feel like I belong exactly where I am, front and center, in my seat, in my story. At last, when a woman reaches my age, people assume her story is nearly finished. But if this journey has taught me anything, it's that sometimes the most important chapters are the ones we write at the end. I stood up for myself late in life, yes, but I stood up all the same. And if sharing what happened helps even one person out there find her strength a little sooner than I did, then every painful step was worth it. If my story touched you, if it reminded you of your grandmother, your mother, or even a part of yourself you thought you'd lost, then, sweetheart, stay a little while longer. Go on and tap that subscribe button for Grandma True Stories. Your support keeps these stories alive. Stories of women who loved hard, fought quietly, and finally learned to take their rightful place in the front row of their own lives. Thank you for listening. Come back soon, darling. I still have many more truths to tell.